Nothing like a good funeral to get the whole family together so they can tear at each other's throats. House of the Dragon, episode 7, I think. I am losing track of these things. But in any case, latest episode. And this is probably the one I feel I'm going to go with the least positive on. I don't want to say I'm actually feeling negative about it. But overall, here's what this one left me feeling. So I understand that we're kind of watching a whole bunch of not great people sort of do little machinations to gain power. I understand that's the premise of the show. I understand that this particular show doesn't really have a hero. And I'm kind of okay with that, but here's the thing. Up to this point, there were at least characters who I felt bad for. I'm not sure I was really rooting for anybody, but there were certainly characters I'm like, boy, you're in a tough position. I kind of feel bad for you. What this episode demonstrated to me is, oh, you're all awful. You're all terrible. I shouldn't feel bad for any of you. I guess I still feel a little bit bad for the king, if only because, boy, is he not cut out for this nonsense, and he really does just want everyone to get along. But it's never going to happen, dude. And at this point, you should know that. So, yeah. I mean, I think back to Game of Thrones, and obviously we had our initial moral linchpin, who was Ned Stark, and we had him all the way through that first season. And so even when he was gone, we still had the initial Stark family. You know, we had Jon Snow, we had Catelyn, we had Robb. And even as they fell away, by the time we were starting to run out of clearly heroic characters, although we still had Daenerys, because at that point she was still clearly positioned to be heroic. Okay, not going to go off on all that went wrong with the end of that show, but even as they whittled those down, by the time they were eliminating the characters who felt like they would normally be the protagonist and or hero of a story like this, as they started to drop off and get killed, by then it was a full season or multiple seasons into the show, so we were invested in all these other people. So even if all we had left were these awful people, we had developed some kind of investment in them. Whether it was an investment of, you know what, you are not a good person, but I kind of like you anyway, or whether it was an investment of, you're awful and I hope somebody takes you the hell down. We had the time to develop that. Here, we're still in season 1. I'm not rooting for anybody, and I kind of want to see them all get taken down. Like, there's nobody at this point, even by default, who I want to see take over. And it's not like I was expecting a happy ending or a happy outcome. I know what show I'm watching. But at the same time, like, I feel like there should be somebody who, in the back of my head, I'm thinking, you know what, things might be okay if you were the one to take over, even if like that probably marks them for death or means they absolutely never had a shot in the first place. But I don't even have that right now, and it kind of disengaged me a little bit in a way that the show hasn't before. I think where I started to feel that was when Rhaenyra hooked up with Daemon, which so the first thing is the fact that Matt Smith does not look any older, despite the significant time jump and the recasting of Rhaenyra, him looking the same age wasn't the problem for me before. It reads weird now when they start making out because, like, the two of them starting to go at it in the earlier episode when we had the younger actress was, I think, appropriately off-putting. Like, it was gross and felt wrong. And not that I'm saying it suddenly doesn't feel kind of gross. No, it does. But now, like, the age gap is badly obscured by the fact that she's visibly older and he is not. He does not look like her uncle. And that didn't matter so much when they weren't doing this. And so that was when I first started to be like, oh. And also, I just didn't love the implication that she had kind of been wanting this for a while, which, like, that might also just be my read. It's equally possible that this is a little bit more of a desperation move on her part. Like, the path she took to try and avoid this, it hasn't worked. So now she's back onto this path. That's a possible read. That wasn't the impression that I got, especially since the music during the lovemaking scene was, I don't want to say romantic, but it was like sort of sweetly wistful. And I think that was another thing that kind of put me off that scene. I'm like, the music sounds like it's trying to get me to be okay with this, and I'm not, and I don't think I should be. So I don't even think it's a bad narrative choice, especially given what we know about the Targaryens. But like I feel weird because I'm not entirely sure how the show wants me to feel about it. And the very idea that the show might be wanting me to think this is a good idea grosses me out a little bit. Again, that might just be me. I don't know. But then, boy, everything came apart after that little turd went and claimed the dragon, which was kind of a cool thing in the first place. Just as a thing for him to do. And I did enjoy the contrast of it, feeling honestly a bit like a triumphant moment for him to do that, and then to come back and just be an absolute little monster about it to his cousins, because he had effectively stolen that dragon for all intents and purposes. So the contrast of that was kind of interesting. But then they start fighting. Then the rock, then the knife, and then the hall where everything comes apart, and all the masks come off. In terms of how far these people are willing to go, and that isn't a mistake; it's a plot point. The guy who's now the Hand of the King again, even points out to his daughter, like, "You showed me a side I didn't think you had. Now I know we have the energy and the skills required to actually win this very dangerous game that we play." So like her showing how vicious she could be, that had to happen. But at the same time, it removed any possible, and like, I'm not going to say I was like super sympathetic towards the queen, towards Alicent. I'm finally getting the names down. Because I wasn't, but I did feel a little bit bad for her because she felt like she was in over her head. But this feels like her diving in willingly. And so I'm like, oh, crap. So between that and the way Rhaenyra behaved and how awful all these kids are, I mean, like the ones who are the least awful are the ones we know the least about. The more we get to know literally any of these characters, they're all being revealed to be awful people. Like the only ones who don't appear to be are ones that we know the least about. and at this point, I expect if we learn more about any of these characters that we don't know much about, they're going to turn out to be awful people too. Like that's just kind of the expectation that this is built for me. And at a certain point, this early into a narrative, trying to get me invested in the fates of a bunch of terrible people is not impossible, but it's tricky. Maybe it's not tricky for other people. It's tricky for me to get me fully on board and to stick with that. I do plan to, because this still feels well constructed, well put together, and it's still got the political machinations that I had missed by the end of Game of Thrones. But at the same time, I do find myself going like, can I be properly invested when there's nobody here who I am rooting for, even in the sense of, I hope, you're not a great person, but I hope you win over that person because they're even worse and you have a grudge. I'm like, no, almost everybody's kind of equally terrible. The other thing that I definitely need to address is what happens with Laenor. So Rhaenyra's husband. So Daemon does exactly what you would expect him to do, which is to try and get his lover to kill him. And what they ultimately end up doing is staging the death so that the two of them can leave together. And when that first happened, I thought, oh, that's nice. But the thing is, I realized after and thinking about it a little bit, The only reason I felt that was nice was because initially the show had presented itself as having done something far worse. The show presents it as if they have now killed the other prominent gay character after the one they already killed a couple episodes back. And when it was revealed they didn't, and he's fine, I felt relief. But the only reason I felt relief was because they did the fake out death first. If they had not had the fake out death and they had just sent him away, I'd be irritated. And the only reason I didn't feel that irritation right off the bat is because I thought they'd done something worse. So suddenly I was relieved by comparison. But when I look at it in a vacuum, I'm like, oh, it's only slightly better to just write the queer characters out of the show. Because you're basically saying, we don't know how to tell stories with these characters. And we're not going to bother trying. So we're just going to get rid of them. But we didn't kill them, huh? And yes, that is nice. That's better. But this isn't great because it feels like an admission that they don't know what to do with characters like this. So they won't bother writing them. And that kind of begs the question, why are they here in the first place? And yes, again, I know there is source material this is based on, and some of it's pulled from that, but just narratively speaking, was there any significant difference narratively between Laenor being gay and Laenor being impotent or asexual and just not able to make it work? Narratively, there will be virtually no difference whatsoever. Which to me, again, kind of begs the question, why did you bother introducing a gay character if you're just going to, kill one and write the other two out of the story, basically at the first opportunity to do so? I don't know. I have argued, and I will continue to argue at this point, that poor or mixed representation is better than no representation, because if there is some representation, even if it's not great, that at least gives us a chance to talk about it and talk about how it could have been better, as opposed to having to be completely hypothetical, pretending that we are in something that we just haven't been allowed to be in at all. So this, in terms of overall representation, this is better than none. But I do kind of want to sit the writer's room down and ask them, did you have anything you actually thought you could do with the story of a gay man in this society? Because it doesn't feel like you did. Could you work on that a little? That'd be nice. So there's a reason why at the front end I said this is probably the one that I enjoyed the least, as opposed to saying that it's bad, because I don't think it's bad. And I think the stuff that works still works, but I'm taking less enjoyment out of it right now, just given how I feel about basically everyone who's still alive and involved in what's going on. You're all awful. And even the Hand of the King, who I had been prepared to give a little bit of benefit of the doubt to before, in terms of yes, obviously he was looking out for his daughter and his grandkids, but he did seem to be trying to do what was in the best interest of the king, at least while also satisfying his other stuff. But here he basically, when he talks to Alicent, he basically says flat out, yeah, we're manipulating you into power. That's what we do. I didn't think he had the stomach for it. So I'm like, oh, okay. I don't know who to even vaguely hope for anymore. And I feel like this story could have benefited from at least one character that I was kind of on the side of. And they're just not really there right now. We'll see how I feel next episode. Maybe I'll have settled into it. I don't know. House of the Dragon. What did you think of the latest episode? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon is what pays the bills and allows me to do this as my living. Even if you can't do that, like, share, subscribe also help. Don't worry too much about that either, because we take a relaxed attitude around here. So you can come on back next time you need a break. Time to give my thanks to my highest supporting patrons. That would include Robin Moore, Zubin Lutfullah, Tarak, the thing that goes doink in the anime, Oliver B., Melinda Walters, Emu Delkey, Theotha Boyd, Becky Sparks, Fernabi Likes the Poodle, Zach, Idolin, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Casperl, Adam RDL Taylor, Shane Ross, Shaylee Gourlay, Brendan LaRose, and TT. If you want your name said while these guys try and distract me, consider looking at the rewards on my Patreon.